So in the first formulation, Kant mentions something he calls a maxim. That is basically a motive or a rule that guides one's conduct. So you're watching this video right now, and it's probably not just an accident that you're watching this video. There's some kind of rule that you've adopted that has motivated you to watch the video, or it's the reason that you have for why you're watching the video. That could be something like, I will watch all the videos in my online courses, or I will do everything that my teachers ask me to do that's associated with the course content, or I will do everything that I can to get a good grade in the courses that I take, and so on. So it could be a different maxim for different students, but it's some kind of maxim that is the reason behind your action. And Kant thought that every time people act, there's a rule like that is motivating their action, okay? That their action can be expressed as following a certain rule or principle, which he called a maxim. And the first formulation, which he believes is a kind of criterion of moral behavior, says we should act only from maxims that we could will for everyone else to act from. So let me give you again, it's still a little bit wordy, but let me give you an example. Suppose that someone is considering cheating on a test, okay? Well, if they were to cheat on the test, they would be acting from a certain maxim, which is probably expressed as something like, when I'm having trouble in a class, when I'm worried that I won't get a good grade on the material based just on my own knowledge, then I'll take extra measures beyond those that are allowed by the course and the professor to improve my grade. And so then the question, if they want to find out whether that action is moral according to Kant's standard, which is the formulation of the categorical imperative, formulation 1 here, if they want to find out whether or not their action is moral, they ask, could I will for everyone else to act from the same motive that I'm acting from while I'm acting from it? In other words, could I will for everyone else to cheat on a test when they're having trouble with the material? And the answer here is no, because if everyone were to cheat on tests in that way, if everyone were to cheat on a test every time that they were struggling with the material, then there would be no value to tests at all. Tests would be meaningless. And so teachers wouldn't even assign tests. What this reveals is that the student who decides to cheat on a test is actually wanting everybody else, or most of everybody else, to follow the rules. They're wanting most of everybody else to just take the test and get whatever score they do based on their actual demonstrated knowledge. But the student wants to make an exception for themselves and say they themselves shouldn't have to do that, or aren't going to do that, and are going to get a grade, a better grade as a result. So what this shows is that, to kind of explain why Kant thought this was a good standard for morality, it shows that the person cheating on a test is not treating others fairly. They want to get a better grade than what they actually deserve, what they've actually earned. And the only way that they can do that is if most other people follow the rules, but they get to break the rules, okay? I'll give you one more example. It's a kind of kindergarten example, okay? So imagine that a bunch of kindergartners or first graders are standing in line for ice cream. They're about to get into line for ice cream. So the teacher says, okay, let's line up for ice cream. And the kindergartners all start to form a line. But little Johnny butts into the front of the line. He wants ice cream a whole lot, and so after all the other kids are all lined up, he just, pushes his way to the front, okay, right in front of the first person. So a fair question to ask Johnny is, Johnny, who do you think you are? Why do you think you get to skip in front, whereas everybody else has to stand in line? If you think you're allowed to butt to the front of the line, wouldn't that mean that anybody should be allowed to butt in front of the line? And if anybody butts to the front of the line, if everybody tries to do what you're doing, then there won't even be a line, and it will be very hard for people to get ice cream in an orderly way. So what that reveals is that Johnny's action is wrong. It's morally wrong because it's not treating others as equal to himself. He's treating himself as somehow special, that he should be able to butt in line. Johnny wants and needs to want for everybody else to follow the rules, but to allow himself to break them. Okay, and that, again, that's what shows that it's wrong. It's not treating others fairly. Now let me briefly explain the second formulation. By the way, these formulations are both extremely famous. Kant's ethical theory is extremely famous, and if you took a course on ethics, you probably would spend 2 weeks studying this, or a week and a half studying this. We unfortunately don't have that time. So I'm trying to blow through the really main landmark points of this without spending too much time on it. And I apologize if it seems like things are going really too fast, but just hang in there, try to, bear with me, and we're going to slow down and look at things more closely very soon. This second formulation, though, again, just to kind of do it in a quick way, states that we should never treat other people only as a means to an end, but always recognize also that they are ends in themselves. Now, what's meant by this is that we should recognize that other people have their own projects and their own interests and their own right to make their own decisions, and they're not just tools for our purposes or for somebody else's purposes. Okay, people decide for themselves what they want, and they have a right to make those decisions. They're not just cogs in a machine that just play a role and that can just be used for something. Okay, so a famous example that's given to try to kind of get a handle on this is, imagine a person goes to a coffee shop and they say to the person behind the counter, "Hey, I'd like a double tall latte with raspberry syrup." Yeah, thanks a lot. And how are you doing today? So this person is kind of asking the other person, or they're recognizing that the person on the other side of the counter is a person and has as much right to live and make decisions and has their own experience of the day and their own projects and interests and so on. And that that person doesn't have to make their coffee, that it would be great if you made my coffee, but you're your own person too. So I can't force you. I don't want to try to force you to do anything. The other example to contrast that with, so that's a person who they're not treating the person on the other side of the counter as a means only. Okay, so now here's the second example. Imagine somebody goes up to the counter at the coffee shop and says, "Yeah, I'd like a double tall latte, raspberry syrup, and hurry up, please. Last time I was in here, it just took forever." And then a few minutes later, I say, "Would you hurry up? What is taking so long? What's wrong?" And this person is clearly not thinking about the experience of the other person on the other side of the counter, and they're not respecting that person. They're not thinking of that person as a person. They would just as soon have a machine where they could just push a button and get the coffee that they want. Okay, they're basically treating the person on the other side of the counter as just a machine to get them what they want, rather than as another person who's equal to them in some kind of fundamental, deep sense, that they don't have any more, that the person who's ordering the coffee doesn't have any more of a right to get what they want, or to to have things go their way, than the person on the other side of the counter, because we're all people. So that is what Kant meant, basically, if you'll follow me in that example, by respecting others' autonomy. And if you've heard this word autonomy, you've probably heard it in many other contexts. In medical context, for instance, it means that patients need to give their consent to treatment before they would be given treatment. So in general, there are exceptions for emergency situations, but if somebody has some kind of health condition and there's a surgery that's normally recommended, but there are a number of other treatment options too that are less recommended by the medical community, but they are available, then the doctor has a responsibility to inform the patient about all of the options. And they can say that the surgery is recommended by the medical community, but they have to also say that there are these other options because they need to respect the patient's right to make their own decision. It would be wrong for, like, a really clear case of violation of autonomy would be if the doctor just said, no, well, we'll take care of it. Just come in next week and we'll take care of it. And didn't tell the patient what they were going to do. They were going to do a surgery. Didn't tell the patient there were other options. Okay. But just perform the surgery, and the doctor just did what they thought was right for the patient without asking the patient or getting the patient's consent. That would be a case of not respecting the patient's autonomy. Okay. So this idea of respecting autonomy is connected with this second formulation. Now, duty theories, this second category, they're also sometimes called rights-based theories, tend to really emphasize things like fairness, justice, treating others with respect, respecting others' autonomy, rights, recognizing others' rights, and fulfilling one's obligations. And just like there's a most famous version of the consequentialist theories and of the duty theories, there's a most famous version of the virtue theories. There are some other very, very famous virtue theories. For instance, Confucius is sometimes read as a virtue theorist, and his theory is, of course, extremely influential in East Asia, in China and Korea and some other places. But in the Western tradition, Aristotle is the most well-known example of a virtue theory. And Aristotle basically thought that ethics, that what it is to do the right thing is to do the thing that a good person would do. And what a good person was someone who did a good job of living the kind of life that is healthy, that's good and healthy for a human being. So he basically thought that to be good is to fulfill one's human nature in a way. Okay, it's to do a good job of living a human life. And the various virtues like courage and temperance. Temperance is not being too attached to pleasurable things, like not getting drunk frequently and things like that. Aristotle thought that the virtues were basically the types of character attributes that tended to be exhibited by people who were living a healthy and a happy life, people who were flourishing, is a way of putting it. And that was what that's what the good was. That's what it is to be a good person, is to basically live a healthy and happy life, the kind of life that a healthy human, a human who's doing a good job of fulfilling the requirements, the needs of their human nature would live. And so if you're following a virtue theory, you think that we all should be sort of trying to live the best life that we can, be the best people that we can. And that includes things like generosity, being good to others, but it also includes some more self-directed things too. And that we should try to encourage others to be the best people that they can too. So for virtue theorists, it's very much about like the kinds of people that we are. We're trying to cultivate virtues in ourselves and in others.